Yul Bahat is going to join us, and he is going to share some stories from the Bank of Israel and how they were hacked. So Yul, welcome aboard. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, reminder, everybody, put your questions in the Q&A panel in the stream. And when we get to the end of Yul's talk, he'll be able to answer some of those questions for you. With that, Yul, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we are all set to go.
Great. So welcome everybody listening at homes. My name is Yul Bahat, and probably the most important thing you need to know about me is that I am a dad for a beautiful 5-year-old, currently practicing proper social distancing. But if I must, I'm originally from Israel. I've been doing cybersecurity. I worked in the cybersecurity space for most of my life now, mostly in the government sector. So I was working for the government of Israel and then the OECD. My two passions in this world is to promote awareness of cybersecurity, but also innovation. I like going to enterprises and governments and introduce them to startups in the security world that are doing something unique and disruptive and are changing the way we do cybersecurity. Currently, I am the co-founder and CISO of Cyberblazer, the training and awareness arm of EM3 Labs, the cybersecurity consulting company based in Paris, France. But enough about me. Today, I want to take you in a bit of a trip through memory lane. Please, let's all step into my TARDIS. And I want to take you basically to the year 2008, specifically April 2008. That was the month where everything started crashing in the markets. Barack Obama was just nominated as the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. Mariah Carey was at the top of the charts, and Jay-Z and Beyonce got married. So all in all, an interesting year. And at the same time, I was working for the government of Israel. I was working for the E-Gov agency. And what we were, in essence, is an ISP, an internet service provider that gave services to the rest of the government of Israel. We gave them hosting services, we gave them internet connectivity, we gave them everything they needed to do internet, basically. Now, at the time, there was no law in Israel that was forcing these agencies to work with us. They could just as well go to the private market. And some of them did that. One of those agencies decided to put their website in a private web hosting company was the Bank of Israel. This is, of course, the Central Bank of Israel. And as you can see, they had a very exciting website full of hot gossip of everything going on in the Israeli financial world. And I want to say right now, I want to make something very clear right now. This was never a website that was connected directly to the bank's system. So it was never there was never any potential threat that somebody hacked the website and through that get into the bank. And probably that's why they decided not to go with us and go with the private market. But in any case, we as the E-Gov agency, we found some vulnerabilities in the website and we alerted on them. And even so, the bank decided not to work with us. And they said, no, everything is fine. Everything is going to be fine. We are taking care of it. And so they did. Until the day of the 25th of April, 2008. And when everybody woke up in the morning in Israel and went to the website of the Bank of Israel, as they always do, and instead of getting this website looks like this, they got something that looked like this. I'm going to read it very quickly. As an anti-colonialist Muslim, I openly summon armed resistance for Palestinians, Iraqi, and Lebanese against the US and Israel. I am serious about liberation by any means necessary. That's the only way oppressed people will free themselves from US or Zionist invaders. Now, obviously, this is not a situation where the bank wants to be. This is, in fact, a PR disaster. And But we expected to get a call from them. We didn't get a call from them, so we picked up the phone and called the bank. We told them, please, 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 let us help you take care of the situation. And they said, no, it's fine. Everything is fine. We have a backup, and we are going to restore from backup. And that's exactly what they did. So they found the backup server, they restored from backup, and lo and behold, exactly 10 minutes later, the website was hacked again. Why? Because it had the same vulnerabilities as the original website. No surprises there. And we called them again. And we said, please, 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 let us help you. And this time they said, you know what? Okay, if you insist, we're going to let you help us. So we asked them to send us the server. We wanted to do an investigation. We needed to do a forensic investigation, meaning we needed to find out what happened, how the hack happened. And they said, okay, we're going to send you the guy with the server. And again, this is a good point to mention that as this was not a production website, as I said before, it was not managed by the bank's IT department. It was managed by the bank's marketing department. And because they were not IT people, they outsourced it to an external web development company. And this happened around the year 2000. And by 2008, that company essentially shut down. They lost all other clients except the Bank of Israel. And they kept basically one person on payroll to take care of just of that website. And the owner of the company, instead of doing web development and web hosting, he decided to become a life coach. And so we figured out that then, and that's the guy who came. So the last employee of the company, the IT guy of the company, he came with a backup server. So not even the full server, it's a backup server, but it was supposed to be fine. And he brought us the backup server, and our IT manager looks at the server and he says, no, just no, absolutely not. This thing is not getting into my network. So this is not a real picture. This is just some picture I took off the internet, but surprisingly, it looks very, very similar to the real deal. What you cannot see in this picture is that the server itself, the case of the server, had very, very big, large red stains. And we tried to figure out what they were. And finally, our IT guy goes there, looks at them, scratches them a bit, sniffs them a bit, and then he comes to us and says, you will not believe this. This is Ketchup. Turns out that they kept the backup server not in an actual server room, but in the kitchen of the IT guy from that company. So you can imagine how well this server, this entire website, this entire system was taken care of. We didn't have high hopes at this point. But we needed to do a forensic investigation, and that's what we did, exactly that. So we found out that the server was what we call a one-stop shop, meaning it ran everything. It was a FreeBSD server running MySQL, running Apache as the web server, running PHP 4, which I'll talk about later on. It was running an SMTP server. It was running an FTP server. So this is how we upload files. All of them are running in the same server connected to the internet directly, which is the ABC of how not to do a production website. And more so, we found out that all of these services were running as root. And again, if you are not familiar with Unix and Linux system, the root user is the ultimate administrator of the system. It can pretty much do anything. You are not supposed to run any service, any system as root, and these people ran everything as root. So once again, not a very promising start. Now we knew, or we had a hunch, that as this was an attack on a website, the first place we needed to look at was the web logs, the Apache logs. So that's where we started looking, and honestly, it didn't take us long to find out what happened. It was very, very clear in the logs. The attackers didn't really try to hide what they were doing. So they found an SQL injection. An SQL injection is where the website takes text input from the users and doesn't sanitize it, doesn't check it that it's not malicious code, and just uses it as is in database queries. So for example, in search or forms or things like that. And that's exactly what the attacker found. And he used that SQL injection. And we saw that what he did on the course of 3 days prior to the 25th, they just took a complete copy of the entire database. They were able to do that using the SQL injection. Okay, so now that we know that, we needed to figure out what they actually found. So we went to the MySQL database, and we started looking at it. So we ran the show tables, or we want to see what tables we have on the SQL server, the MySQL server, and these are basically the results we got. And specifically, one thing that we found that was interesting is the FTPD users. So for some reason that nobody could tell us why, the MySQL database contained a table with all the users of the FTP. And again, reminding you, the FTP is the service used to upload files into the server. More than that, it just contained the username and clear text passwords of the accounts allowed on the FTP service. So they weren't even encrypted. They weren't anything. And reminding you, this is all running in root privileges. So anything that is uploaded through there, anything that is executed through there, is in root permissions. What they used this information for was to upload something into the server, something called a shell, specifically C99 shell. This is a web-based application that allows to send commands directly to the operating system, and again, using root privileges. So now, in essence, they had full and complete control over the system. They could do whatever they want to do with it. So, fortunately, what they chose to do with it was to change the homepage of the website. They could have done much more damage. I'll get to that in the end. Okay, so now we know what happened. Well, now we know the flow of the attack, but that's not enough for a forensic investigation. We're already in there. We want to know, how does this code look like? What else could have happened, or what do we need to fix to make sure this doesn't happen again? So we started looking at the code. And if you remember before, I told you that this entire website was running on PHP 4. PHP 4 came out in the year 2000. So by 2008, it was already considered a very, very old framework that had serious security vulnerabilities in it, and it was out of life, so it wasn't recommended to be used. But the code itself, the code of the website itself, is what we call a code created by copy pasta. It's basically the same piece of code copied over and over again with minimal differences. And because, as it happened, that code that was copied had an SQL injection in it, in fact, we found approximately 900 different instances of the same SQL injection. And when you get something like this, when you get a system like this, and you are asked to protect it, you are asked to do something about it so it doesn't get hacked, there's only so much you can do, okay? Basically, you need to give it first aid. You need to fix the most serious problems. Obviously you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, and you don't really want to fix everything. Again, this is the website of the Bank of Israel. At this point, it was out of commission. It was down for approximately a day and a half. We didn't have a lot of time to do something serious. So again, first thing we do is to make first aid corrections. Second thing you do is you wrap it with compensating control. So you wrap it with external systems that are supposed to stop SQL injection attacks, even though they still exist in the code itself. And that's exactly what we did. So it took us another day and a half. So total, the website itself was down for approximately 3 days before we could put it up. And by that time, the person in charge of the monetary of the funds in Israel basically yelling at us, you have to put it up. You have to put it up right now. So there was no way. Okay, actually, no, let me go to the next slide. So basically the question is, the one question that was left here is, okay, we understand what happened from a technical perspective, but the real question is, who cares, right? I mean, this is a marketing website. I already told you that this is not a production website. This is not connected to the bank's internal systems. So who cares? Why was it so urgent or so important that we put this back up as soon as possible? And I have a bunch of answers for that. So number one, as I said, it's a PR disaster, right? Even if your website, so this is now lessons we can learn. Even if your website is not considered, that it's not critical that it's up 24/7. It's not critical that nobody will lose their lives if it's down. You still don't want to be in a situation where instead of your website, there's a big black screen with anti-US, anti-Zionist propaganda. But more than that, this is how the chancellor of the bank publishes, news. That's their main channel of communication with the public. So absolutely, they needed to put that up. More than that, so basically what the IT people of the bank told us, it's not important because the banks of Israel, the commercial banks of Israel, are not getting their information from this website. They're getting their information from back channels. It turns out that other services, other companies in Israel are taking this information from the website. Specifically, we found out that all the accounting software in Israel were taking the interest rates and were taking the currency exchange rates through the RSS feeds of this very public website. Coming back to what could have happened, again, the attackers had full control of the system. They could have done whatever they want. They could have changed the database instead of changing the website. Imagine if we would have found out that somebody changed the currency exchange rates in Israel and nobody knew about it. What I didn't tell you, what I forgot to tell you before, is that another thing we saw in the Apache logs, in the web server logs, is that this was not a drive-by shooting. It's not something that they found out about and then directly executed an attack. They knew about this SQL injection vulnerability 6 months before they actually decided to attack. The reason they decided to attack was as a retaliation on something that the Israeli army did, some operation they did in the Gaza Strip. But they had 6 months of preparation, and they chose to do nothing with it. And this was pure luck. If they have done something like that, we might have never known about it. So, probably a good time to start summarizing things up. Here's what we can learn from it. So number one, your website is important. Even if you don't think it's important, your website is important and it deserves to be protected. Number two, never, ever, ever put all the services of a production website in the same internet-facing server. There is a proper way to do secure architecture for internet-facing systems. If you don't know what this proper way, proper architecture is, hire a security person. Hire somebody that knows their job. And don't do it after the fact. Don't do it after you already getting hacked. Do it from day one. Security is not something that, it's not an add-on. It's not something that can be patched on top of existing systems. Security is something that needs to be integrated, designed, and work hand in hand with the business flows and with the business targets of the system. And probably the most important lesson we can learn from this story is that if you do have a server and you do have a backup server, probably please do not store it in your kitchen. Otherwise, it will get ketchup stains on it, and that's not something we actually want. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. Wait just a second, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I apologize, folks. I'm talking with a muted microphone, which never works well. This is the fun of live events.
Sure.
So let's try this again. Put your questions in the Q&A panel. You'll appreciate it. Great presentation. We do have one question that came in right away. Do banks often use RSS to set their currency exchange rates?
So as I said, for the public use, for everybody else to use, absolutely yes. RSS is a great tool that has been with us for who knows how long. For production systems, for the banks themselves, then no, that's not how they got the information. They had it directly from the source.
This is basically informational stuff. It's not what they're actually using for processing transactions and so forth. In other words,
and exactly, again, this is the excuse they had on why not go with us. Or we were, so as the E-Gov agency, we were quote unquote more expensive than the private market. So they didn't want to go with us. They want to go with the cheaper option, which is unfortunately the less secure option.
Okay, fair enough. There's another question that came up in Slack, looking for the name of any tools that could be put in place to wrap around a website to protect it from SQL injection. Are we talking web application firewalls here?
So absolutely. So one is web application firewall. That's a great tool right off the bat. But also a lot of monitoring, honestly. Even if you are not able to protect it. So a web application firewall is a great tool if you know how to use it. It's a very, very tool to use improperly. But at the base of it, just monitor, just find out what you don't know, find out when something bad is happening. So you are able to react in days or even hours and not 6 months.
So are you talking then like access logs, things like that on the web server? Or
everything you can log. So we're talking about, of course, SIM solutions, for example, so logging solutions. And my own personal agenda is whatever you can log. So web logs, network logs, system logs, file logs, anything that you can think of that can generate alerts should be logged and should be monitored, obviously.
Okay. One other question that just came in. How do you know the day one? If the vulnerability has existed for more time, say a month before?
Obviously, we can never know 100%. What we could see is that the attacker didn't even try to hide anything. They didn't change the logs in any way. So it was all there. We could see them. So approximately 6 months before, we could see them exploiting the vulnerability, making sure that they can access the SQL, and then stop. They didn't do anything with it. So just basically once a week, they sent a request, validated it's still there, left it alone. And that's so once a week for 6 months. And then 3 days prior to the attack, then we started seeing a bunch of events in the logs. So this is our assumption. That's the best assumption that we have. We didn't see anything in the database logs, and there were database logs. We didn't see anything in the file system log. So all of those logs were untouched as far as we know.
Okay. Terrific. All right. Well, thank you so much, Yul. Are you going to be available then in Slack for a while?
Absolutely.
Okay. So folks, again, if you've got other questions for Yul, feel free to catch them in Slack. That's the Track-Security channel for those of you that are in there. Thank you again for your time today, Yul. And we'll have our next speaker up here in just a few moments.
Thank you for having me. And
Thanks,
have a good
everybody.
conference.